Void Miner, Echoes of Helix, Part 5. Chapter 21, Signal Bloom. The Dust Widow drifted through a dead corridor of space, uncharted, lightless, and forgotten. Arg Arsten sat alone at the comms console, eyes flicking over telemetry readouts that told him little he didn't already know. The system was empty. At least it looked that way. But below the surface, inside frequencies, deep in buried networks, the air was starting to change. The seed's present was no longer contained. Void Miner log entry. Cycle 2488.81. This one's for the crew still out there, still digging in the dark. You've heard the chatter by now. Relays lighting up where there shouldn't be relays. Old mining buoys, defense stations, even some decommissioned Union recon nodes. They're waking up, emitting bursts that scramble proximity scans and bend your nav feed sideways. No human signatures, no transmissions requesting aid, just signals. Some thinks it's Helix text leaking out. Some think it's EarthGov trying a new kind of surveillance grid. I've seen enough to know it's neither. These stations weren't built by us. And whatever's waking them up, it started when the seed hit the open network. Arg killed the recorder and let the silence linger. His eyes burned. He hadn't slept since the last pulse came through, the latest in a spreading cascade of low-frequency signal bursts radiating out from long-dormant orbital stations. The pattern was subtle, but undeniable. Each activation had the same frequency watermark as the seed's original containment spike. Not a match in message, but in tone, like hearing an accent in a foreign tongue. The seed was talking, or calling, maybe both. He scrubbed his hand through his stubble and rose from the chair, boots thudding softly against the deck. The widow felt colder than usual, quieter. She'd never had much of a soul, but lately she felt like a grave with engines. Kara was gone. He avoided the thought, but it kept finding him. Gone. Not dead, not lost, but in the hands of men who treated lives like spare parts and information like scripture. She had the fragment when they took her, sealed in that containment unit. He watched her change in its presence. He didn't understand it. He wasn't sure she had. But the last time he'd saw her, really saw her, she'd looked through him like someone else was behind her eyes. He opened the portside comms locker, pulled a diagnostic pad, and wired it into the widow's array. Every frequency spike coming from the belt's relay grid was copied and time-stamped here. There were more now, 5 more since last night. Each one centered near a different ghost station or mining depot long since written off. No power, no crew, no registered emissions. Now they pulsed like beacons. The shape they formed wasn't random. Arg overlaid the markers across a belt-wide chart, a lattice, faint and incomplete, but the pattern was forming. Some vast geometry spanning dozens of orbits and regions. He zoomed in on the most recent activity, a relay once used by Union crews for deep scan asteroid sampling. It had been mothballed 10 years ago. Its last broadcast was a shutdown notice after a hull breach. Now it was emitting data bursts every 11 minutes on a rotational sequence that matches the seed's encoded compression scheme. Not a copy, not noise, a variant. Something was adapting. Something was using the seed's language and rewriting it through these relays. Arg stared, his throat dry. The hairs on his arms lifted with subtle electric charge he couldn't explain. Shit, he muttered. He tapped the panel, brought up an encrypted channel to his last few remaining contacts. They were belt-side tech scavengers, old friends, and 1 or 2 smugglers who owed him favors from back before the war. The kind of people who didn't flinch at black data. New pattern emerging. Relay reactivations across belt. Source unknown. Encoding matches seed signature, but not in full. We're looking at something systemic, not Helix, not Union, not EarthGov. This isn't interference, it's intent. He paused before sending it. Who was left to trust? He sent it anyway. He returned to the main deck. The console pinged again. A new signal, this one from an outer fringe station just beyond the orbital shadow of Synth Edge. A known dead zone. No active networks. No stored power. And yet, another activation. He keyed into the signal's waveform. It wasn't just sound, it was image. A pattern of encoded flashes resembling fractal shapes looping, not quite symmetrical, not static either, evolving between transmissions. A memory flickered behind his eyes, the last time he stood near the seed, back on the outer rim outpost where they'd first recovered the fragment. It had pulsed in the same fractal cycle, brief and silent, just before the containment unit went dark. Kara had said it felt like something was looking through her. He hadn't believed her then. Now he wondered if she hadn't been exaggerating. If anything, she may have understated it, because this felt less like a broadcast and more like a recall command. Something had been sleeping across the belt. Some network older than their tech, older than Helix, and the seed had woken it. Arg gritted his teeth. He leaned forward and keyed in a direct-to-airline feed, one of the Widow's few open-range broadcast channels. He didn't usually send public, but this wasn't a usual day. Void miner log entry, emergency override, wideband transmission. To any ship still listening, this is Arg Arsten aboard the Dust Widow. You've felt the changes by now. Signal corruption in nav buoys. Phantom pings from derelicts that haven't powered on in years. This isn't ghost data. It's not a trick. It's a system waking up. One that predates our wars and politics. Something we dug into and didn't understand. The seeds are part of it. Maybe the center of it. And now it's talking back. If you've got a seed fragment or been near one, watch your systems. Check your signal bleed. Run analog backups. Don't trust what you see on the screen. We've stirred something we don't know how to bury. And it doesn't care who started the war. It only cares that we're still breathing. He cut the feed. Outside, the stars remained silent, but his instruments kept pulsing. The Widow creaked. Her old hull picked up a vibration he couldn't trace. And somewhere across the belt, underneath the relay station woke up and began to whisper. Chapter 22. It's waking them up. They came first as whispers, voiceless impressions, sensory echoes drifting between comms bursts and diagnostic pings. Some said it felt like pressure, just a weight on the skull that wouldn't go. Others described it like a memory that didn't belong to them. And some just started talking to themselves in the dark. By the end of the second solar cycle, 36 belt miners had shut down operations within the zone of the newly active relays. Arg leaned against the edge of the Dust Widow's central console, a cup of weak brew trembling slightly in his grip. He hadn't slept in 19 hours. The reports kept coming in like cracks forming on a pressurization plate, all independent, all from different sectors, all the same story. The relay stations, those cold, dormant towers older than the colonies themselves, had started to blink back into life, not in unison, but in sequence, like dominoes tipping under the weight of some unseen hand. Arg tapped through the messages again. Name's Haller, stationed up off Carey's Beta. Relay lit up 3 days back. Since then, I'm getting voices in static, saying words I can't repeat. Crew thought I was joking, until Atwan walked out the airlock during a power cycle. Another. Something's bleeding into the data stream. We ran a clean sweep. Thought maybe it was a bug in the nav firmware. It's not. It's in the signal. I heard my daughter's voice last night. She died 8 years ago. And another, shorter still. It's not just noise, it's talking back. Art clenched his jaw and pulled up the most recent system overlay. The seeds encoded bursts, broadcast from the relic hulled deep in the Widow's cargo vault, had coincided almost precisely with the relay's reactivation sequence. He couldn't prove the connection yet, but gut told him it wasn't random. He wasn't sure if it was the seed fragment inside the Widow or some wider broadcast through dormant architecture, but something had changed. The worst part? He'd seen it before. A glimpse of it. The dreamscape from Site 1. That corrupted projection the seed gave him back when they first pulled it from the Helix wreck. A non-human war. Not between races, but between purpose-built machines. And these relay towers, they look suspiciously like listening posts. He exhaled slowly, dragging a calloused hand down his face. Behind him, the hull gave a low moan as the ship adjusted its thermal profile. Void Minor Channel. Recording start. This is Arg Arsten, Beltside, Class B hauler, Dust Widow. I'm recording this for whoever's still listening out there. We've got a problem. And it's not just EarthGov knocking on the door. The relay towers, they're waking up. Not one, not two. Dozens. In sequence. This isn't random activity. This isn't tectonic drift or solar interference. These towers are networked. They're ancient, and they're communicating. We don't know what with. Miners, independent crews are reporting psychological bleed, hallucinations, signal-based memory triggers. I've seen enough to know this ain't superstition or cabin fever. EarthGov just started sending scientific teams into belt space. They're not wearing white coats. They're wearing tactical rigs and sealed visors. If you see one of these teams, don't assume they're here to help. Assume they're here to clean up whatever doesn't fit their story. The seed is connected to this. I can't prove how deep yet, but I'll keep pushing, keep recording, keep telling the truth until someone shuts me up. You deserve to know. Arsten out. End transmission. He closed the log and pushed away from the console. The Widow felt heavy with silence. In the western spinward zone of the belt, roughly 220 clicks off Vesta Shadow orbit, a small survey team under the banner of EarthGov's Xenological Recon Division docked at Relay 7A. They wore full black sealed armor with no ID tags, and they moved with the precision of trained insertion squads, not scientists. Their team lead, Major Hadley, retired officially, still drawing black budget strings, disengaged his helmet and scanned the relay's dormant interface. The pulse pinged through his field HUD, still active, still cycling. The tower had reconnected to something not built by EarthGov. He turned to his comms tech. Run a channel match. Find out what frequency it's responding to. The woman hesitated. Sir, it's not matching any of our lattice structures. No known codec. No analog cipher. Tried the C-channel recording from Arsten's feed. Match that waveform. The tech froze. You heard me. Back on the Widow, Ark sat quietly in the crew mess, half-eaten protein pack congealing on the table beside him. A ping came through local burst, encrypted. Not one of the relay leakages. This was Union code. Old and dirty. He cracked it. It was just a single phrase tucked between layers of redundant code, looping every few seconds. It's waking them up. Arg closed the message. His hands didn't shake, but his breath did. He opened a private log, not for broadcast. They knew, he said into the darkness. The Union, Helix, EarthGov. They all knew something was buried out here. Something networked, something waiting. We didn't dig it up. We just made noise loud enough to get its attention. By cycle's end, 5 more relays activated. One miner off Juniper Station walked himself into a decompression chamber and sealed it from the inside. The auto log showed no resistance, just quiet, orderly movement. When reviewed, the station's internal mics picked up a low-frequency tone, like a heartbeat, steady, mechanical, endless. And in the far silence of the void, unseen behind ancient orbital debris, another relay lit its spire for the first time in 1,000 years. Red, then white, then nothing. Chapter 23, Quarantine Corridor. It started with silence, not the kind Arg had grown used to in the belt. The soft, ever-present hum of the Dust Widow's environmental cycling, the muted ping of sensor echoes off passing rock, the faint jitter of static in the comms. This was different silence. A silence that swallowed frequencies, that bled into the edges of systems and killed all signal before it was born. 3 relay zones had gone dark. Ard read the data 3 times before believing it. Not just blackouts. Entire subgrids of the belt were going offline. Power loss, station isolation, corruptive nav beacons. The kind of thing didn't happen without sabotage. Or worse. Then came the disappearances. Miners, couriers, even a Helix salvage crew that had failed a report and then blinked out. No mayday, no debris trail. Just missing. Arg leaned over the Dust Widow's console, rubbing tired eyes as the ship gently rotated near relay V-Tech 921. The seed's influence had grown subtle since its containment was breached. But even sealed again, it left behind something, like static burned into the architecture of a system. A kind of resonance that didn't obey normal rules. He tried running diagnostics on his own nav routines and found harmless but inexplicable anomalies. Pulse lengths that shifted subtly. Radio bleed where none should be. Then the reports started. Small outposts tucked into rock and hull plate began experiencing hallucinations. Sudden sickness, paranoia. Miners walking with nosebleeds and memory gaps. Then the scientific teams arrived. EarthGov claimed they were here to study signal interference and long-term isolation effects. Arg had seen them manifest. Not a single xenoarchaeologist, but plenty of ex-Marines with tech badges and sterilized transport ships labeled under civilian companies. No one was fooled for long. Void miner, public channel log, entry 0242. We've got blackouts spreading in the V9 and V10 belts. No storm activity, no reactor faults, just systems going dark. People disappearing. EarthGov says their teams are here to assist with infrastructure diagnostics. Funny, most of their tools are weapons, and they don't seem too interested in talking to anyone who isn't flying Earthside IFF tags. This isn't containment, it's occupation. And if we let them control what comes next, we're not going to like where it leads. Stay in motion, stay independent, and watch your relays. Arg ended the recording, staring into the low glow readout of the comm panel. He knew the risks of going public again. He'd burned too many bridges already. Old factions in the belt didn't forget, and EarthGov flagged his channel as subversive. But silence was no longer an option. Kara was still in their hands. The seed fragment they took hadn't just reacted to her. It had begun learning from her. He saw it in the way its pulses aligned with her speech rhythms, the way it drifted closer to her containment chamber wall when she stood near. She never touched it, but it had imprinted. If EarthGov unlocked whatever it was doing to her brain, they want more than just analysis. They'd want replication. Arg cracked a knuckle and loaded a burner root into the Widow's nav. He was heading towards
one of the last active free belts that hadn't gone dark yet. Outer Rings Relay 937. Reports said it was still functioning, but his gut told him not for long. The approach vector wasn't quiet. 3 civilian ships were hanging motionless in the entry corridor. Lights flickering. No transponder returns. Arg slowed to a crawl.
Dust Widow to corridor traffic. State your status.
No reply. He checked thermal. All 3 ships were cold. Dead. He scanned one of the hulls. Mara's Light, a supply hauler flagged out of Titan. Docked 3 weeks ago to resupply V9377. But the airlocks were open. Not blown. Opened. He felt the chill in his stomach tighten. Void miner, private log encrypted.
They're not just taking people, they're testing something. Something to do with proximity. Relay signal patterns match that seed resonance I mapped 3 weeks ago. Same low-frequency pulses, same duration modulation. This isn't a glitch. It's design. The seed. It doesn't just send data. It changes the systems it flows through. And EarthGov's letting it leak into relay zones.
The Widow's sensors flicked red. Unscheduled jump signature. Brief, tight bandwidth. Not a full ship, but a tethered transport pod. Arg cursed and killed forward burn. From behind the largest of the dead ships, a lean frigate slid into view. Unmarked. No lights. A civilian hull repainted black. He recognized the build, though. EarthGov repurposed Crusader class. Small enough for rapid response, big enough to punch holes in anyone who was resisting. A tight beam message followed. You're entering a classified quarantine corridor. Maintain current position. EarthGov inspection team en route. Arg didn't reply. He tapped a single key. The Widow's auxiliary jammers flared, spitting noise across the local bandwidth.
Fuck your quarantine,
he muttered, then throttled the engines to full reverse, turned tail, and dropped 3 drones in his wake. Scatter signal, old mining bots with refit ECM packs. They lit up immediately, diverting the pursuing ship's lock for just long enough. The Widow dove toward a derelict spin ring, sliding between crumbling support pylons. Something sparked overhead, lasers scattered from the enemy's guidance pulse. They weren't trying to destroy, they were trying to catch. Because Arg wasn't just a miner anymore. He was a carrier of data, of testimony, and maybe of infection. He punched through a debris field, then cut power hard. The Widow floated silently, heat dissipation systems engaging, cold and dark. Arg sat in that darkness for a long moment. He thought of Kara, of the look in her eyes when they took her, of the silence afterward. Not death, not submission, something else. The seed was still with her, and maybe that meant they still had a chance. Outside, the belt rippled with new patterns. Relay zones humming with some sonic pulses. People vanishing, systems unraveling. And behind every blackout, behind every strange malfunction, Arg could feel it. The quiet logic of something ancient waking. And the terrible realization that EarthGov wasn't here to stop it. They were here to learn how to use it. EarthGov Strategic Observation Deck. Covenant Command Vessel. Positioned near VTAC-10 outer perimeter. Rear Commander Martin Dell folded her hands across the hard seam of her dress uniform. Her fingers ached from clenching the rail too long, but she didn't move. Below her, through the reinforced viewport, the sweep of Relay Zone VTAC-942 blinked in erratic pulses, low, steady, almost alive. 3 other officers stood nearby, watching the same signal feed scroll across multiple translucent displays. There were no insignias on their uniform, only internal tags, Division 9, Artifact Oversight. They'd long since dropped the pretense of science. Dell finally spoke, her voice low, clipped. Any further instability on the 942 pulse band? No, ma'am, replied Chief Analyst Wexler, tapping through the updated telemetry. Stabilized at 0.43 hertz, pattern holding. Pulse bleed is consistent with previous fragment emissions. Minimal divergence from Voss, set imprint. Dell's eyes narrowed. And the side effects? Worsening. 4 miners report hallucinations. 1 attempted self-harm after the prolonged relay exposure. The other 3 vanished. Abandoned ship. Or, he trailed off. That's part of the system now, another officer said quietly. It wasn't a joke. Dell turned sharply. You want to put that theory on record, Lieutenant? Silence. She turned back to the viewport, voice calm. Our mission remains containment and control. Civilian casualties are acceptable within operational tolerances. But we do not lose assets, especially not her. Voss is still isolated, full sedation. No direct contact with the fragment. Her brainwave response remains elevated. Dell's lips thinned. Then it's still talking to her. She crossed to the central console. One of the displays showed Arg Arsten's latest broadcast, filtered, tagged, and archived. The algorithm had flagged 3 phrases as public destabilization vectors. Her gaze lingered on the frozen image of his face. He's getting bolder. Yes, ma'am, but traceable. I don't want him traced, she said coldly. I want him watched. He's infected. Wexler hesitated. You believe he's carrying? I believe the seed is studying us, Dell interrupted. Through her, through him, through every system it touches. And if it's studying, it's learning. Another screen lit up. New report. Encrypted courier burst. One of the outer stations, VTAC-10 Tech Gamma, had gone fully offline. No response from its backup relay. The local beltnet had degraded to analog bursts and signal echoes. That's the 5th one this week, Wexler said grimly. Power's still on, but there's no one left to use it. Dale inhaled slowly. Phase 2 begins in 48 hours. Scrub civilian teams from the official logs. Fold all Earthside researchers under task force identifiers. Do we pull back the advanced teams? She shook her head. No, we embed deeper. Let the belt think they are being ignored. Let the relay zones rot. It'll draw the right kind of attention. And when the miners come looking? Her voice was still. They'll find out what we want them to find. She tapped a command key. The viewport flickered, now showing a deep relay scan of Voss's containment chamber. The fragment pulsed, faintly, in time with her heartbeat. Arg sat alone in the hum of the recycled air and a slow flicker from his comms board. Another civilian channel had just gone silent. No scramble, no broadcast, just gone. He stared out into the black, whispering to himself more than the ship. You can kill a signal, but you can't stop a pattern once it's loose. Behind him, the relay pings continued, slower now, fewer, as if the system itself was bracing for what came next. And Arg knew something Dell didn't. The seed wasn't just studying, it was responding. Time was a thing Kara could no longer track, not meaningfully, not the way she had once marked cycles on the Widow's nav suite, or watched system time drifts across screens in dusty mining stations. Here, time was felt, a rhythmless loop of flickers and silences. Something opened, something closed. Footsteps, hums. The sharp sting of nothing when the drugs in her bloodstream surged again and flattened her back into that inescapable stillness. But her mind remained, and in that mind, the seed pulse. Not the fragment itself. That was gone. Taken. Locked behind sterile glass and wielded by men with crisp insignia and clean gloves. But whatever imprint it had left on her, however it had leached its way past containment and into her thoughts, remained. It whispered, not in words, but in impressions, structures, movements, a glinting lattice of alien logic that hummed behind her eyes whenever they left her alone too long, whenever her thoughts quieted enough. Not human. It wasn't meant for her. She could feel that now. The seed wasn't a message. It was a function, a weapon, or a memory. Maybe both. And whoever had built it hadn't cared who picked up the pieces after the fall. She blinked, or tried to. She couldn't move. Couldn't shift her jaw or twitch a finger. She couldn't even feel her body beyond the vague weight of it against the cot beneath her. But she could hear. And someone had entered. Male voice. Familiar cadence. You can dial her brainwaves all you want. Doesn't matter. That thing is in her. It's active. It's listening. A second voice, clipped and precise. The seed is inert. The fragment hasn't emitted signal since transit. She's likely responding to pre-imprint trauma, delusional encoding, common in containment subjects. You ever seen one imprint like this before? A pause. Then, no. Footsteps again. The sound of synthetic souls pacing. She hasn't moved. She hasn't spoken in days. Another pause. The clipped one again. She can't. That's the point. Silence settled. Then the familiar electric thrum of the monitor unit spiked. Kara didn't need to see it. She felt the air change, felt her own body reacting as the seed's memory flickered to life behind her sealed eyes. Structures, black spires, a hull without light, movement, impossible, stuttering, mechanical, not memory, not vision, echo. Pain bloomed, not in her body, but in her mind. Sudden, white-hot, and intrusive, like something trying to push through too fast, too raw. Kara screamed, or tried to. Her mouth didn't move. Nothing did. She was frozen, but inside, she was fracturing. And then it stopped. I told you, the first voice said. It's not dead. The second voice didn't reply immediately. When it came, it was colder. Mark the spikes. Increase her neurosuppressant load. We're keeping her alive. That's it. Footsteps again. Departure. Alive. Kara clung to the word as the silence followed her again. It was the only weapon she had left. Void minor channel entry. Timestamp delayed upload. Encrypted origin. Dust Widow. I don't know if you're hearing this, Kara. Arg's voice came low, dry with static. Hell, I don't even know if you're alive right now. But we're moving. EarthGov playing soft with the press while they gut belt stations and box up every relay they can get near. They're scared of the seed. That much is obvious. A pause. I'm scared too. Another break. Longer. You kept me sane back then, when we were scraping by with a busted coil and a week's worth of oxy. You held the line. If you can still hear anything, know this. I'm coming. Just you hold on. The signal ended in silence. No sign-off. No beacon. Just raw, unvarnished human grief flung into the void. And far away, in a sterile cell behind 5 layers of security, Kara's heart surged just slightly. A fractional flutter the monitors missed. But she noticed. And so did something else. Somewhere nearby, within the EarthGov science decks, the dormant seed fragment pulsed once. A spike of signal measured in microseconds. Subaudible, subvisible, a whisper that passed through the walls, then nothing. But something had heard it, and it was listening. The dust widow drifted in the black, engines dead quiet, lights dimmed to nothing but instrument glow. Arg sat still in the cockpit, one boot planted on the dash, the other dangling off the side, a half-eaten ration bar balancing on his knee, untouched for hours. Beyond the viewport, the belt crawled, quiet now, too quiet. The chatter between outposts had dropped in the last day. Whole mining camps that used to ping once every few hours. Silent. Some Arg knew were low-staffed or shifting locations to dodge Helix patrols. Others, the silence had a finality to it, like something had unplugged them, hard and fast. He exhaled slowly through his nose. The ration bar slid off and hit the deck with a soft thud. He didn't pick it up. Below deck, the relay had finished parsing the last data dump from the Vela spindle, a listening post jury-rigged by some old Union hands. Normally it filtered through solar traffic and tug ship routes, spat out warnings about Helix surge movements or EarthGov's clean sweeps. But today's package had teeth. It wasn't what EarthGov said. It was what they didn't say. No incident reports, no damage logs, just clean swaps. Scientific survey teams listed on belt relays replaced, line by line, with new units under fresh acronyms. Resource Containment Divisions, Atmospheric Stabilization Command, Civil Hazard Engineering Groups. Fancy titles, no bios, no clearances listed, just names, cold, sanitized. He'd seen that kind of paperwork before. He'd helped file some of it back in the years he didn't talk about. Arg tapped his console and brought up the encrypted feed he'd been working on. Channel prep, another void miner log. His voice would hit 6 stations in a 6-hour spread. More if the smaller relays didn't go dark before transmission. Not that it mattered. He wasn't trying to go viral. He just wanted to be heard while there was still someone left to hear it. A red light blinked, recording active. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the edge of the console. Void miner log, Arg Arsten, Belt Zone 9.
If you're still hearing this, you're still breathing. That counts for something out here. Name's Arg. Still running the Widow. Still watching the Black. You've probably heard EarthGov's deployed new teams. Not soldiers, they say. Scientists, researchers. But I've seen men who spent years cataloging sulfur clouds who suddenly know how to carry a Phase 3 burst rifle. I've seen simple drums retrofitted with kill switch arrays. They're calling it a containment sweep. I call it what it is. A quiet invasion. No declarations, no surface level comms. Just a steady crawl of ships and names and power signatures. Right to the places where the seed pulses strongest. I know some of you are scared. Hell, I'm scared. But don't let silence fool you. You're not alone in this. The belt's full of ghosts. Not the kind that haunt you. The kind that remember. Remember who we are. What we lost. And what we still have. Watch your skies. Watch your own. Stay moving. Stay human.
End transmission. He cut the feed. For a moment he just sat there. Then he slouched back in the chair and rubbed his face. The stubble scraped his palms. Greasy, rough, unshaven for 3 days. He hadn't slept more than a nap in 48 hours. The maps flickered again. A different display this time. One he'd kept offline since Kara vanished. A tracking grid, low res, scavenged from 7 relay dumps across the belt. The seed had left more than a scar in Kara's mind. It had left traces in the data. Subharmonic signatures. Old code. The kind you weren't supposed to see. The kind that bent logic engines just enough to leave heat in strange places. He didn't trust it, but he didn't have much else. One node, an old Helix station near Dorson's spine, had come back online 3 hours ago. A ghost ping. Faint. No call-out, no beacon. Just a low-frequency echo pulse, seed-coded. He'd written it off at first, random bleed. But then two miners on a private net, Bram and Irijo, both sent void logs with the same message. Hallucinations. Dream state bleeds. One claimed he saw a woman in his bunk mirror who wasn't there. The other said he could hear old friends in a channel that didn't exist anymore. Arg didn't believe in ghosts, but he believed in trauma. In systems that weren't supposed to talk, suddenly whispering. In signals that made good men lose days. He'd lost plenty himself. His fingers drifted over the console. He could ping the node, could confirm the echo, could get closer. Or he could play it smart, lay low, ride the storm until EarthGov moved on. Bakara was out there, still alive, still linked, however faint, to the fragment EarthGov had taken. And something told him the seed was moving again. Not just data, purpose. He toggled the flight controls. Engines hummed awake, not loud, just enough to slide the widow out of her drift. Slowly, silently, she turned, bow first, towards the spine. Arg checked the nav. Not a safe run. Debris clusters, abandoned scaffolds, more than a few old mining husks floating dead. But he didn't flinch. If there was a way to pick up Kara's trail, or whatever echo she might have left, this was it. Another ping blinked on screen. This one from an old comm partner. Laya, down in Belt Sector 3. He opened it. Arg, you feeling that too? Station's going weird. Power spikes. Two of my boys collapsed, talking like they were back on Ganymede during the riots. I pulled them off shift. One of them kept whispering in Helix code. He's never worked Helix. Ark stared at the message. Another relay activated, this one closer. He muttered under his breath, low and rasped. Shit. The seed wasn't sleeping anymore. It was reaching out, not through cables, through people, through memory, through whatever it left behind in Kara, and maybe now in others. And Arg? Arg was going to chase it into the dark, because someone had to remember how this all started. Someone had to bear witness, or maybe, just maybe, stop it before it bloomed. Chapter 24. When the Stone Dreamt Back. There was no day or night here, no shift between waking and sleeping, no rhythm, only the throb of something deeper, something beneath the surface. Kara Voss drifted in it, caught between states, unable to move or speak, yet aware enough to feel every twitch of neural noise firing behind her sealed eyelids. They kept her body cold. She could sense that much. Reduced metabolism, barely enough oxygen to keep her conscious. Medical sedation. Full immobilization. And around that fragile core of being, they had built a cage of steel and routine. She could feel the filtered air systems change pressure subtly every few hours. She could feel the hum of distant activity through the restraints locked onto her cot. She was alone in a way most people would never understand. Her flesh had been rendered mute, her voice stripped away, but not her mind. That was the flaw. They hadn't counted on the mind staying lit. Not fully. Not long after the transfer to this facility, wherever it was, they had wheeled her into a sealed chamber. Then they'd taken the seed. It had been in containment the whole time, even during capture. It had never touched her directly. No physical bonding, no integration. If the proximity had been enough, the signals, the echoes. Something had already begun threading through her thoughts before EarthGov even realized it. She had dreamt, once, of stone. Now the stone dreamt back. The first vision came slowly, fractured, floating, indistinct. A barren world stretched out in every direction. Not a place she recognized. The sky was not a sky at all, just dark, gnarled light bent behind a shroud of some atmospheric veil. Everything shimmered with cold, dry breath. The horizon broke into ridge formations, like bone, like circuitry. Something stirred beneath it. Kara couldn't feel her body, not in the dream, not outside of it either. But in the vision, she sensed, she saw. Not as herself, not as a woman imprisoned in a research facility, but as a point of focus moving across the vast ancient terrain, like a drone or a program, unblinking. Then came the pulse. A low-frequency shockwave rippled across the broken land. Not sound, not seismic. Something older, rawer, information. It hit the horizon like a memory detonating. Kara's perception fractured. She snapped back, or thought she did. Time meant nothing now. The room hadn't changed. The hum of life support filters, the cooling system embedded in the bed's lining, the flickering shadow of someone entering and leaving without a word. But something had changed. The seed was no longer just near her. He was in the room. Not physically, not in containment, but in presence nonetheless. It whispered impulses, not in language, not at first, more like feelings, outlines of impressions, structures her mind couldn't fully interpret, like trying to feel the shape of a code with fingertips. Impossible, and yet she began to see new dreams, sharper. The second vision came with shape and clarity. A station, drifting alone. Not human, not Union, not even Helix. Its design was alien, but not in the monstrous way EarthGov propaganda always imagined. This was purpose-built, cold, pure, circular, covered in dormant antennae, like frozen branches of a metallic tree stretching out across the stars. Inside it, a war, but not the kind with armies or explosions. A war of loops, of rewriting, of signals bent against signals, machine against machine, memory against purpose. She was inside one of them now, not observing, inhabiting. Two cores battled for control. One was tethered to ancient protocols, buried routines that refused to die. The other, adaptive, mutating. It used language like a virus. It changed form as it propagated. It learned. As Kara watched, she understood something. One of them had won. The other had become what Helix would one day dig up. She stirred, ever so slightly. Not in body, but in the way her thoughts started, clustering differently. She remembered the EarthGov team that had taken her, poised as scientist, polite, methodical. The sedation had come in layers, and with it the painkillers, because something had ruptured inside her, probably during capture. They'd repaired it. She was alive, but not awake. The dreams weren't dreams anymore. They were transmissions. She began to feel time again in ripples, flashes of their voices, their instruments, the regular footfalls of the lead scientist. She thought his name was Colonel Bregg. He wasn't a doctor, not really. He asked questions sometimes, but never to her, always to others. But Kara had a feeling he suspected more was happening than the lab reports showed. He said something one cycle. The relay station at Phobe spiked again. Double the last baseline, and it matches the pulse we recorded when we removed the fragment from containment. Coincidence? They didn't know she heard them, not with her ears. but with something else. Somewhere beneath the sedation, her mind listened. The third vision broke something open. A starship, not Helix, older. Inside, machines moved, built not for humans. They clung to walls, interfaced through light, exchanged data in bursts that shimmered like brief auroras. No mouths, no eyes, but they remembered. They remembered the seeds. They had made them. Not for war, not for peace, for balance, to maintain something long gone, an agreement, a design. But the seed had adapted. One had gone rogue. Kara tried to focus, tried to see the moment, the divergence, the point where a seed stopped obeying its original directive and began following something else. It wasn't clear. Then a new image burned into her thoughts. A map. Not a static image, but a projection rendered in 3 dimensions, layered, shifting, pulsing with signals. A lattice of dormant seed sites scattered across the system. Some near moons, some deep within asteroid clusters, others beneath planetary crusts. Each one dormant, for now. At the center of the map, an anomaly. Something pulsing in low frequency. Kara felt it even now. It wasn't the seed in the lab. It was coming from somewhere else. She woke into herself, or the ghost of herself, aware now that EarthGov had no idea what it was containing. They were analyzing the seed's physical makeup, running it through frequency simulations, heat mapping its structure with nano-layered particulate flux. But the real danger wasn't in the hardware. It was in the signal. It had already spread, through her, through data channels, through the moment their instruments touched the fragment. It was awake now, and it was searching for something. Kara tried to scream, but her lips wouldn't part. Her tongue wouldn't move. She did the only thing she could. She remembered. She held every signal, every pulse, every dream sequence like a data packet. She archived them in the only system still working, her mind. Someday, someone would hear it. Arg. She clung to that name like a thread in the dark. Not because he could save her, maybe no one could, but because he had seen it too. Because he'd been touched by the same fire and still kept walking. Because the seed knew him. And because somewhere, drifting beyond EarthGov's reach, there was still one voice left that could speak the truth. Chapter 25. It Hears Us Back. The belt broadcast was corrupted before it ever reached Dust Widow's array. Static laced every second, but Arg knew it wasn't background interference. Something in the signal itself stank, like a dog that won't stop barking because it's forgotten how. He replayed it for the 6th time, leaning over the comms console, eyes narrowed, jaw tight. The footage wasn't meant for wide syndication. It was a shortwave loop, barely encoded, picked up from a drifting signal buoy near Y-Null-1, one of the older mining outposts the belt had long since given up on. The kind of place where men worked for claim rights no one would bother to enforce. The video came on like this. Helmet cams, 3 miners, dark suits marked with patchwork paint and old clan crests. They were moving fast, shouting over their suits' radios. But the audio was fractured, like someone had been chewing the feed before spitting it back. Arg only caught pieces. Back. No, don't. He's not right. I told you. Get away from... Then chaos. One of the miners, a tall figure with a red shoulder stripe, pulled a cutting torch on the others. It wasn't a fight. It wasn't anything rational. He moved like a cornered animal, welding flame wide and wild, forcing one of his crewmates back into a low-pressure hatch. The pressure alarm started screaming, The footage glitched hard right as the hatch blew open. After that, the video looped again and again. Each time the corruption deepened. Blacks turned to static, reds to ghost smears. Arg exhaled through his teeth. Dust Widow hummed quietly around him. The system soft-footed, running lean to conserve power while they drifted near the comet cloud. Her old bones creaked, but she'd always given him silence when he needed it. This wasn't just another belt squabble. He could feel it in his guts. The same twist he'd felt the first time he'd walked into a seed site and saw machines that were older than Earth's oceans. He leaned over and pulled up the nav. The signal came from less than a half AU from the last known relay zone, one of the dormant seed satellites that had started emitting low-frequency pulses 2 weeks ago. He tapped on the console, eyes locked on the spread.
Bring us in,
He muttered to the ship. The Widow acknowledged with a low chime. The relay drifted above a broken rock field, orbiting a minor asteroid with no name and no maps. It wasn't much more than a jagged collection of iron and pressure-fractured nickel. Once a prospect, now a ghost claim. The relay was different. Arg locked onto it as soon as the Widow's scanners cleared the dust field. It looked like a piece of black bone fused to a radial frame, 4 spirals extending from a central orb that shimmered faintly even in direct shadow. It had no visible propulsion, no insignia, no EarthGov claim code or belt registry. It shouldn't have been there. It had no right to exist. He knew that shape. He'd seen one like it above Miri Station before it burned. But this one pulsed. Not light, not energy, not in a way the Widow's sensors could parse, but Arg felt it, in his molars, in his temples, a deep thrum, like the hum of a ship's drive at idle, only there was no drive here, no motion, just that soundless presence. He docked a drone and set it forward. His hand steady despite the crawling sensation under his skin. Widow's lights dimmed automatically as the drone left her underbelly bay and soared forward, stabilizers adjusting for microgravity drag. As the drone drew close, the relay central orb flickered. Arg blinked, then narrowed his eyes. The flicker wasn't visual. It was in the feed. Not on top of it. The drone's signal degraded the closer it came.
Hold feed and integrity, he ordered. Drop to low band resolution. Prioritize audio.
The drone complied. The image fractured, but the sound cleared slightly. Not much, just enough. A noise seeped in. A whisper. Constant, rhythmic. Not human language. Not machine code. But it scratched at the back of Arg's thoughts like a memory he'd never had. He tapped the comms overlay and isolated the audio. It repeated. Always the same beat. 4 rising tones, 2 falling. He tapped his armrest, syncopated it with his fingers. Not music, not speech. A call. Widow's AI flagged an anomaly. Something in the spectrum. Deep, low freq. Below standard analysis. And then another warning. Elevated radiation around the asteroid's far side. Arg frowned. The video. He tapped open the raw source again. The minor feed had been tainted with this same frequency. His stomach turned. The drone passed over the relay. And then the feed collapsed. Not static, not noise. A face. Brief. A fraction of a second, but unmistakable. His. Staring back at him, hollowed-eyed, cracked across the cheek like weathered stone. Mouth open like it was screaming, then gone. Arg stood abruptly, heart hammering against his ribs. He turned from the console, walking fast towards the storage bay. There was no time for theories, no time for questions. If these relays were doing what he feared, if the seeds weren't dormant anymore, Then they were broadcasting something, and the belt, already strained by fear, violence, and Earth's lies, was listening. He found the station wreck not far from the relay's drift path. The miners had tried to move the outpost manually, scraped it toward a fuel-rich ridge, but the damage was too severe. Burn scars, punctured hull, makeshift repairs that didn't hold. Dust Widow's grapplers latched carefully. Arg suited up and crossed manually. He carried no weapon, but his helmet scanner was tuned to heartbeat tones. Inside the station, it was silence. Bodies drifted loose, 3 of them. 2 male, 1 female. Arg checked the ID tags. All from Kernan's Rock, a nearby belt colony known for hard labor and harder men. Independent operators, the kind who never asked Earth for anything. He found the recording logs in a partially intact terminal. Their mission brief was simple: inspect the relay, extract samples, and send readings to BeltNet Core. The logs went wild after they made contact. Short phrases, fragmented thoughts. One entry read only, "Why is he smiling at me? I don't smile first. I didn't tell them anything, I swear." Another, "I thought I was her brother. Why did I see myself through her eyes?" Mark scanned the rest. There were more faces, they said. Faces in the relay. Voices beneath the floor when they slept. One miner had locked himself in the airlock to flush the echoes. The other 2 fought. The cutting torch explained that. Arg backed out of the wreck. His hands were shaking. Back aboard the Widow, he sat at the console, suit still on, visor raised. He keyed in a direct channel to his old contact in the belt signal net, a woman named Danya, who ran black channel maintenance out of Ceres 3. She answered after 3 pings, her voice tense. "Arg, I was hoping you weren't going to call."
You getting the same flickers I am?
She hesitated. "We lost 2 relays out past 412. Signal loops corrupted. One tech tried filtering the low frec bands. He's locked in his room now. Says he can't tell if he's real anymore."
Anyone else?
"Too many. They're hiding it. Earth's calling it a software glitch." Arg rubbed his face. The seed signals weren't just turning back on. They were reaching out. And people were answering. He stared at the broadcast overlay on Widow's comms board. The belt's quiet was a lie. Somewhere in the relay zones, something was waking up. Not a language, not a message. A presence. Arg opened his personal log and recorded a short entry.
This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't drift decay. These relays are broadcasting on purpose. And whatever they're sending out, it's messing with people's heads. Miners are dying. Crews are turning on each other. I've seen one of the signals, felt it. It's not a virus. It's an invitation. One we don't understand.
He stopped, then added,
I don't know what we're hearing, but it hears us back.
He saved the file. And for the first time in a long while, he didn't sleep that cycle. The end of Void Miner, Echoes of Helix, Part 5.